In the kingdom of Valyria, a land where power, wealth, and reputation held sway, there was a young man named Adrian Cole. He was a talented merchant, wise beyond his years, whose reputation for fairness and hard work had earned him respect in the kingdom. He worked diligently, maintaining his father's legacy, and was admired by his peers for his pragmatism and moral compass. However, despite his success, there was something missing in Adrian's life, a longing, a yearning for something deeper. He dreamed of meeting someone who could stir his soul, challenge his perceptions, and make his world come alive. That's when he met Isabella. Isabella was the daughter of the powerful Lord Aurelius, a wealthy and influential nobleman in Valyria. She was known far and wide for her beauty, but also for her sharp tongue and rebellious nature. She defied societal expectations at every turn, flaunting her status, indulging in scandalous behavior, and frequently clashing with her father's strict rules. While many admired her beauty, few dared to befriend her due to her toxic reputation. Isabella's life was a chaotic storm of rebellion, wild emotions, and a refusal to comply with any kind of order. Adrian first heard whispers about her when he visited Lord Aurelius' grand estate to conduct a business transaction. Despite the power and prestige of the Aurelius family, Adrian's attention wasn't on the gold and silk of the market. It was on the young woman who stormed into the courtyard, her fiery red hair glowing in the sunlight, her eyes burning with defiance. She argued with her father, refused to be quieted, and then disappeared into the mansion with no regard for the authority of the man she had just scorned. Adrian was intrigued but wary. He had heard the rumors she was trouble, and her father had given up on trying to control her. Lord Aurelius noticed the young man's interest and called him aside. "I see you've noticed my daughter," the old lord said, his voice stern. "I warn you, Adrian, stay away from her. She is nothing but trouble, a tempest of chaos. I cannot even begin to imagine the pain she has caused me and everyone around her. Do not be fooled by her charm or beauty. She will ruin you if you let her." Adrian, always respectful and wise beyond his years, nodded solemnly. "I understand, my lord. I will not intrude." But the more Adrian tried to distance himself, the more he found himself drawn to Isabella. There was something magnetic about her, something raw and unapologetic that fascinated him. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her spirit that captured him. Despite her rebellious nature, there was an underlying vulnerability in her eyes, something that suggested she had been hurt, that her defiance was a defense mechanism against a world that had failed her. And Adrian, despite all his wisdom, couldn't help but want to understand her better. Days passed, and Adrian tried to keep his distance, focusing on his work and avoiding Lord Aurelius' daughter. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One evening, after finishing a long day of business, Adrian found himself walking through the gardens near the Aurelius estate. It was a quiet place, and he sought solace from the bustle of the city. As he wandered, he caught sight of Isabella sitting alone by the fountain, her back turned to him. Her head was bowed, and her usual fiery demeanor seemed to have softened. The moment felt like an invitation, and against his better judgment, Adrian approached her. "You're here alone," Adrian said softly, his voice careful not to startle her. Isabella turned, her lips curling into a mischievous smile. "I often am," she replied with a hint of bitterness. "My father would prefer I never leave the house, and society can't tolerate my existence for more than 5 minutes. So yes, I'm alone." Adrian hesitated. "Your father is concerned about you," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "He cares about your safety and reputation." She scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Safety? Reputation? What's the point of it all if I'm forced to live a life that isn't mine? My father's kingdom, his expectations, they all suffocate me." I am a prisoner in a gilded cage. Adrian could see the pain in her eyes, and it stirred something within him. No one should live like that, he said quietly. She gave him a long, piercing look, and for the first time, she seemed to really notice him. She laughed, but it wasn't a mocking laugh. It was the kind of laugh that betrayed an edge of vulnerability. So you're the knight in shining armor, are you? The one who's going to save me from myself? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't say that, Adrian replied calmly. But perhaps there's more to you than what people see. Maybe your heart is worth a second look. Isabella stood, crossing her arms. Do you think you know me, Adrian Cole? She asked with a fire in her eyes. Do you really believe you understand what it's like to be me? To live under the shadow of expectations and duty. I don't pretend to understand, he said gently, his voice softening. But I do know that people change, and that you don't have to live in the cage you've been given. Her eyes widened for a moment, a flicker of something deeper passing through them. But just as quickly as it came, she closed herself off again. You're wrong, she muttered, turning away. You don't know me? Adrian watched her walk away, feeling a pang of regret. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't ignore what he had just felt. Something inside him had shifted. He was no longer merely intrigued by her. He was drawn to her in a way that went beyond the surface. The days that followed were filled with an unsettling tension. Adrian couldn't stop thinking about Isabella. He tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept wandering back to her. Her rebelliousness, her beauty, and the storm that raged within her. Despite the warnings, despite everything, he found himself returning to the estate again and again, hoping for a glimpse of her, hoping for a chance to talk. Their interactions became more frequent, and slowly, a connection began to form between them. They began to understand each other in ways neither had expected. Adrian found that beneath Isabella's biting sarcasm and defiance was a woman who longed to be free, who hated the constraints placed upon her. And Isabella began to see in Adrian a kindred spirit, a man who didn't judge her for her flaws, but who saw her as she truly was, a woman with dreams, pain, and potential. But love, especially a love that grew out of defiance, was never simple. Adrian had warned himself against falling for Isabella, yet he found it impossible to resist her. She challenged him, pushed him to question the life he had known, and made him feel alive in ways he had never experienced before. Isabella, for her part, found herself drawn to Adrian's kindness and wisdom. He was the first person who hadn't tried to control her or mold her into something she wasn't. Despite the growing attraction, the relationship was anything but easy. Isabella's father, ever the overprotective figure, grew suspicious of Adrian's visits. He warned the young man once again, his voice cold and firm. Stay away from my daughter, Adrian. She will ruin you. But Adrian could no longer ignore his heart. He had fallen in love with the woman she was becoming, not the rebellious princess she had once been. And Isabella, in turn, began to see the possibility of a life beyond her father's expectations, a life with Adrian, where she could truly be free. In the end, it was the strength of their bond that overcame the obstacles placed before them. Isabella chose to leave her father's estate, breaking free from the constraints that had bound her. She and Adrian built a life together, one that was rooted in love, mutual respect, and the belief that people could change. Lord Aurelius, though initially furious, eventually came to understand that his daughter had grown. She was no longer the toxic, rebellious girl he had feared, but a woman capable of making her own choices, with the support of the man who loved her. Together, Adrian and Isabella defied the odds, proving that love could heal even the deepest scars, and that sometimes the greatest rebellions were the ones that led to the truest form of freedom.